to today's Reagan Communications free webinar, Proving the Value of Internal Communications. My name is Justin Teach, and I will be your moderator for today's event. I'm coming to you from Chicago, Illinois at the Reagan Communication headquarters, where we promote many webinars and live events. Your instructors for today will be Alyssa Hagan and Lindsay Lagreid. Today's call will be approximately 60 minutes long. Now, audience, during this event, you are in listen-only mode. Now, that means that your line is muted, so you cannot hear the other participants or any background noise. Now, you may be listening to the event today on your computer speakers or on your phone line. Depending on the speed of your internet connection, you may experience breaks in your audio broadcast over the computer. If you do experience any audio trouble on the computer, we recommend dialing in on the phone line for the best and most reliable audio connection. Now, after Lindsay and Alyssa complete their presentation, we will move right into our question and answer session, and you'll have a chance to type in your questions for them to address. Now, I encourage you to submit your questions during the presentation, audience, so we can get started right away. To do so, please send those into the Q&A box to the right of your screen. Now, if you are having any technical questions or having technical difficulties, please enter those into the chat box, and I'll do my best to help. So once again, please use the question and answer box for presenter-related questions and the chat box for any technical questions and/or difficulties. That completes housekeeping. Once again, I want to welcome everyone to today's Reagan Communications free webinar, Proving the Value of Internal Communications. My name is Justin Teach, and I will be your moderator. Right now, audience, it is my pleasure to welcome to the line Alyssa and Lindsay. Alyssa and Lindsay, can you say hello?
Hello.
Hi, everyone. So grateful to be here.
Well, we're grateful to have you. We are already on your screen, which is perfect. So I'm going to prompt the audience to get your questions in as soon as possible. And with that being said, Alyssa and Lindsay, please take it away.
Fantastic. Alyssa, do you want to go to the next slide and we'll do quick intros? Awesome. Do you want to go ahead and start us off?
Sure, I can. So my name is Alyssa Hagan. I'm the Associate Director of Internal Communications and Engagement at Encompass Health. I have been with the company for almost 10 years, very excited about that milestone. And I oversee our internal communications function and also work very heavily with our HR team.
Awesome, thanks so much. And my name is Lindsay Lagreid. I'm a solution architect at Limeade, and I think it's one of the most fun jobs because I get to travel around and spend time with our customers, people like Alyssa, who are doing amazing things to really form and shape a new world of work where employees feel cared for and valued. And my job is to help them understand how they can use the Limeade technology to scalably do that. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation, and I have a feeling you all will truly enjoy hearing what Alyssa has to share. So let's go ahead and dive in. What's really interesting is we know, and I think we see around us every single day, that the world of work is changing. Employees have an enormous amount of power and are really demanding that work be a better experience for them, that they feel cared for, connected, respected, engaged in their work, and the organization has the responsibility to do that. And what's really challenging about that is it's kind of hard to understand, what does that phrase employee experience mean? Does it mean how it feels to work here? Does it mean what kind of communications I get or what types of programs does it offer? And if you go to the next slide, Alyssa, we actually did some research where we asked HR leaders, how would you describe the employee experience? It's always really interesting when they use the word in the definition to define it. So that second one, experience, is a little interesting, but I think the first and third are so fascinating. The employee experience is described as how does it feel to work here? And it's actually everything. It's every interaction with every person every day at the organization. And so organizations and HR leaders are sort of clamoring to figure out, what all does this mean? Everything is a little daunting and overwhelming. And what am I supposed to do about it? It can certainly be overwhelming, but we know that internal communications plays an enormous role in this everything, how does it feel to work here experience. And at Limeade, we use technology to help our customers do that, demonstrate that care, and create that feeling of a powerful employee experience. And so you'll notice that I mentioned care. And care is really the key differentiator of Limeade's technology. We believe that care is what makes an employee experience powerful, and our technology helps organizations use technology to demonstrate that care to their population. And so for communications buyers, how can you think about incorporating care into the things that you do? If we go to the next slide, care may seem like sort of a altruistic or soft word, but it's actually incredibly legitimate and mission critical to the success of an organization, and the science supports that. So the Limeade Institute has done research that shows that when an organization cares about their people and when those employees feel cared for, they report having more manageable levels of stress and they report less experience of burnout. And if we go to the next slide, there's also this fascinating relationship between experiencing care and perceiving care and having higher well-being, higher engagement, and higher inclusion at the organization. And if we go to the next slide.
Sorry, Lindsay.
We can also see that care is related to intent to stay and likelihood to recommend your company as a great place to work. So this isn't just something nice to do. This is directly related to the business metrics and results that the leaders of your organizations care about. And so I'm so excited because today we have with us Alyssa, who's an example of one of these incredibly caring people who is changing the world. Her work in Encompass Health is a beautiful example of bringing care to the forefront to drive business results and using internal communications as that means to demonstrate care. It really has been such a privilege to work with her. I've learned so much from her, and I think you all will during our time together today. So with that, take it away, Alyssa.
Thanks, Lindsay. I don't know if I'm changing the world, but we're, doing it one little communication at a time, right? So thanks so much. Thanks for the intro. So everybody, I'm excited to be here with you today. Thanks so much for spending your time with us as we talk through how to prove the value of internal communications and build partnerships to help reach company goals. So first and foremost, I do work at Encompass Health. As I mentioned, we are a leading provider of inpatient rehabilitation and home-based care, which essentially means we have just over 130 inpatient rehabilitation hospitals that provide physical therapy as well as speech and occupational therapy and full-time nursing care to patients who have experienced a traumatic injury or a chronic illness. So we're trying to get them back to the life they once knew. And we do the same in our home care agencies, for which we have over 100 home health and hospice locations throughout the United States. And in those two segments, we have around 44,000 employees. And the main focus where I'm going to spend my time today is around the inpatient rehabilitation segment, because that's mostly what my internal team assists with. We do help and partner with our home care team as our organizations have continued to better merge together. Health South, the legacy brand of inpatient rehabilitation hospitals, purchased Encompass Home Health and Hospice back in 2014. And in 2018, we rebranded the entire company as Encompass Health. So that's a little bit about my organization. So let's dive into internal comm strategy. So these are the nuts and bolts of what my team does. First and foremost, we're constantly looking for ways to make our company messaging more consistent across departments, across those hospitals, the local branches, and the home care agencies. And through that, I oversee channels, all of our internal channels, including the Hive Employee app, which is powered by Limeade's One product, the app that they provide. And then we also have a variety of e-newsletters, whether they're company-wide, segment-specific, department-specific, discipline-specific. There's a lot of things that my team supports for our partners, as well as just traditional email. Those can be targeted email messages or broad messages that go to the entire organization. We also, of course, have an intranet, which is for another day, a topic for another day, town hall meetings for our executive team, as well as leadership messaging whenever there are larger initiatives that require toolkits or other very specific messaging that we want to help our leaders and equip them to trickle down messaging from the top. I also, which we're going to talk about mostly today, work very hard and have worked very hard over the last 10 years that I've been here to build corporate partnerships with our various teams and departments. Strive very hard every day to align their projects with company strategy whenever we can. And then I would be remiss not to mention that we have a very decentralized communication approach outside of that company strategy. So what we do is provide tools like the employee app, the Hive, as well as other means for our local hospitals and home care agencies to communicate locally to their employees. So we give them lots of resources to do that because my team is 2.5 people for that 44,000 employee population. So it would be very, very hard for our wee little team to do all things internal communication. So today what I'm going to cover are 4 main points. The bird's eye view that we have as internal communicators, as well as give you some tips on how to start asking the right questions to build those relationships with other partners, and how to support company goals through those partners. And then, of course, maintaining relationships with those people. So let's dig into the bird's eye view. So I like to think about this as connecting dots across the organization and breaking down silos. So firstly, as I'm sure all of you are in this same boat, our team gets requests to communicate a variety of topics. Anything from the small stuff just here at the home office about, parties and cars with lights on in the parking deck, to company strategy things coming from our development team or our strategy officer. A lot of other things that I'm sure you all have to communicate as well are things like annual enrollment, employee engagement surveys, HR trainings, compliance trainings, diversity initiatives. There are so many things, but we can use that understanding to our advantage. So because we get to see pretty much everything that's going on, the big initiatives across the organization, because we're hopefully being asked to communicate them, or we have a seat at the table to learn about them, or we're starting to break those barriers to get that information, we can use that to our advantage. So while siloed departments are not your problem, there is a way that we can just help people align to make sure we're all working toward the same goal. You can do that by making a master editorial plan of all the things that you get asked to communicate. I like to start with the cyclical things that I know happen at the same time every year, like don't talk to me about anything else in November other than annual enrollment, because that's where my focus is. That's where my team's focus is. That's where the entire company's focus is. So that's just a good example of that. You can make a master event calendar if that's applicable to what your team supports. And of course, informing other teams of competing priorities and deadlines, and then align them when their topics relate. So employee capacity to just take in information or to act on something that you're asking them to do only goes so far. So to keep that sort of element of care, as Lindsay was mentioning, what we do is if someone comes to us and says, I want to communicate this training on this date, and I know that another team has a training going out on the same date, well, it's not my responsibility to figure out, what happens with it. I can at least tell those teams, hey, you guys might want to talk, because otherwise employees are being asked to do 2 different things during the same time frame, let alone launching on the same date. We actually had that happen this summer with our compliance training and our diversity refresher training. And so we just had those teams chat, and they figured it out, and one of them moved it because they wanted the priority to be on their initiative solely versus paired up with that other team. And so another way to talk more deeper on aligning the teams when their topics relate, this can help employees understand things, and it also helps the home office or your corporate office, wherever your messaging is coming from, to look like the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, which is very important, as I'm sure you all are aware. So again, another example of that is maybe that compliance training is rolling out and IT wants to have some messaging that kind of aligns with keeping patient data private. Well, how can we align those messages so that the employees see this as one big important piece, because they do come together? There's a piece of the training related to patient privacy. So how can we work together on it, or find another time, maybe a few months later, to reinforce that messaging? So let's dig into as well, how do you start asking the right questions and foresee some barriers that may block your path as you're trying to align what these teams are doing, whether among themselves or just in general with company strategy? So the first question I like to ask groups is, are you still taking orders from certain teams? Do you feel like an order taker? And I'm asking it rhetorically because we are on a webinar. I can't see your pretty faces, but I bet if I asked it in front of all of you, I would see hundreds of hands raised, because there are a lot of times when we just feel like people are saying, hey, just send this out to everybody, or can you send this tomorrow, or here's an email message that I think is really pretty and I want to put it in front of 5,000 people. Can you do this for me? And while that's a place to start, a lot of times teams don't understand that internal communications can really be a strategic partner, that we know that big picture. They don't realize that because they don't get to see that big picture. So let's ask some questions to dig a little bit deeper and help them going forward. So for example, what are your goals with this communication? And if they don't know, I kind of laugh in my head a little bit when they don't know, but it happens, it very well happens. So instead, then, what are their business goals, and where does this particular project or this particular communication, this email, this poster, for heaven's sakes, fit into those goals? And so once you dig into that, then you can learn a little bit more about where they're headed. Another one is which audiences need this information to perform this action, or what have you. The thing there may seem very just vanilla to our teams, but if we're not asking those other teams, a lot of times they think it needs to go to everybody, and you get halfway down the path and you realize, well, now that I have more information about what this initiative is, it really only needs to go to the finance people in the organization, or this is just solely a clinical message, or this is just for home office corporate employees. And that helps you then on the front end to save you some time and them, especially for their expectations. And then inquire into how they track those business goals. What does success look like to them? How are they measuring their progress? Are they reporting it to someone? And can we see a recent report? A lot of times after I see the report of what they're saying, that helps me better understand where they're going, where this communication fits, and we may actually tackle it a little differently based on that information. Sometimes as I probe with these questions, I get at, well, how can communications help? How can you help me with my goals? Which again, makes me laugh inside a little bit, but I keep my face straight when I'm sitting with these people. And I think, communication is the enabler to help you reach your business goal. Without strong communication going to the right people at the right time, we can't help you get from A to B. So let's kind of dig into then how can we support those company goals? And I like to call it stealing data. You're not really stealing data, but you're asking them more deeply on what are those goals? If it's behavior change, actions, or completions of trainings, for example, something else, you can then use their tracking mechanisms. Like, it's not your responsibility as a communicator to track how many completions of that compliance training or how many people are getting their flu shot annually in the organization. Those are not your things, but those departments who have goals around those are the ones tracking that. So as we start asking, what does success look like? How are you measuring this? Can I see a report? That helps you then at the beginning of your initiative with them to establish some benchmarks, or say, hey, we want at least 90% of employees to take this compliance training by the deadline. We want to make sure we're hitting all these people. So you can use your communication channels then to move that needle. So readership and click-through rates, if you are able to see those for your emails, or if you have an app for your messages, or if you're tracking things on your intranet, whatever it may be, they only tell part of the story. It's a good sort of door to walk through with those teams of, hey, we just rolled out this message. It looks like it was received well because, 50% of people clicked through to take the compliance training. I hope that you're seeing that on your end, that people are actually completing it on time. You can create that communication plan to support their goals. If I'm going to hit touch points, we've got our benchmark, we've got our goal, we launch it, then midway through, let's check on it again. We'll send another message and we'll check it again. And then at that point, if we have, 2 weeks left of whatever initiative this is, we can say, we're still not quite to our goal. We've got a long ways to go, or we just need to push it over the edge. Let's pivot our communications. Maybe we need to target a certain region of employees on that compliance training because they're really low and far behind, but we learned from their regional HR rep that, well, they're struggling with turnover. They've had, people don't have as much time to take this training. Well, that's a good thing to know. That's data to tell us how we can move forward and pivot to communicate better to that particular region to get that up, because this is a training that everyone needs to take. And then, of course, continuing to set check-in points so that you can track that. So just like we were talking about. So here's some examples of how to build these relationships through using their data and your communication expertise. So I want to start with one where my team, I am part of the marketing and communications team at Encompass Health. We have an internal piece and a marketing piece. And so our marketing team came to us, the digital gals, said, we really need to get more employees to note us as our employer on LinkedIn, or just rebrand their employer. You know, I mentioned that in 2018, we rebranded from Health South to Encompass Health. We still had thousands of employees tagging Health South on their LinkedIn profile, or the Encompass Home Health and Hospice segment as well. So we did a campaign. We pulled together a communication plan. We offered employee rewards points, included it in a variety of channels, including newsletters of both segments. We put it in the employee app because employees can't get to social networking sites. IT blocks them while they're at work. So we definitely used the mobile app as a way to get around that, to put the link right in front of people's hands and say, here, log into LinkedIn right now and do this. It takes 5 seconds. So we pushed those posts out. So in September, when we held this, we added nearly 900 followers who tagged Encompass Health as their employer. Now, some of them may have been new employees, but a lot of them were people going and changing it from the legacy brands. And you can see on this chart that we had a large spike here and there as we sent out messages. So again, this is proving back to my own team, hey, it looks like our messaging worked. This is something to keep in mind for next time we need a digital campaign around a social channel, for example. Another one is partnering with IT, so getting outside of the communications team and working with another partner. They came to us and said, we just really need to increase reporting of the phishing emails that are coming in because we want to increase security of our network. So it took a little while to get to this point with them. They just kept saying, we want awareness of phishing, and that'll help. That'll make it great. Well, that's one thing. But when I started asking for the data, I discovered this chart here in the middle of the slide that they were already tracking. So it did not take them more than 5 minutes to pull this over and send it to me. We have, almost 90 million emails per quarter coming into our system company-wide. 75 to 85 million of them are blocked by our system controls. And then there's about 6,000 per quarter that are reported by employees. So that's the number that they wanted to increase. They want employees to be more diligent about reporting phishing emails, whether or not they, are being overly conscious of it and reporting something that maybe was okay. That's fine. We'd rather them report it and our IT team say, nope, this is fine. You can, perform this action or delete it or whatever you want. So that they're catching more rather than not enough and someone's accidentally clicking on a malicious link or attachment and opening up our network to cyber criminals. So we, again, created a strategic communication plan, included details in our monthly cybersecurity, included monthly cybersecurity features in our newsletter, and did periodic Hive app posts as well. Through the Hive app, we also did trivia contests, which was really neat. You can see an example of this here on the right side of the screen. We had 5 questions throughout the month of October related to phishing and other cybersecurity concerns. Through this, we learned that on one topic in particular, about 250 employees got the question wrong. So not only are we working to educate them, but then we have some data on the back end saying, okay, next month or next quarter, as we do more of these cybersecurity awareness messages, we need to focus on that topic because people are not aware of the best way to create a password or whatever the topic was. So I'm really excited to see what the Q4 data looks like because I'm hopeful to see that there are more of these malicious emails being reported versus passing through. And then another one is related to employee well-being. So at the beginning of 2019, I sat down with my benefits team as I've been working with them for years to come up with some sort of measurable goals around employee well-being because I keep hearing through the grapevine or getting called in on smaller projects that the board of directors is very interested in how employees feel about our benefits offerings and about how the company really cares about employees. And so I sat down with them and said, what can we measure? What are your goals? What do you want us to help you work toward throughout the year? And they said, based on the 2018 scores of the employee engagement survey around the question, the company encourages me to focus on my health, it was only 62% favorable. So based on that, Alyssa, we want to increase awareness of that commitment to employee well-being, help employees learn more about our benefits programs, to hopefully, make that more favorable. I said, okay, so if that's all we've got, that's fine, but where else can we, take a benchmark and help employees, but also help you show that what we're doing together is making a difference through the numbers. And so the other goal they had was, okay, Alyssa, let's look at the MD Live account registrations. And MD Live is our basically virtual visits or virtual doctor program. So you can call and talk to a physician for minimal things, but it still saves you time and money to have somebody call in a prescription for that cough that you can't get rid of or whatnot, where you don't really need to see a physician physically. And so they gave me a benchmark. At the end of January, they had 4.9% of our Blue Cross medical plan members that were registered for MD Live. And as we communicated about this throughout the year, we took other snapshots. So at the end of July, we had nearly doubled it. And I'm really excited to say that we were able to, although this is a small number, I understand that 7.6% of all of the, 25,000 employees on our medical plans isn't huge, but still the fact that we doubled it, that's great. So then when the benefits team was asked to put a slide in the board of directors deck for this last meeting in October, they were able to, not in October, the July one, excuse me, they came to me and said, hey, Alyssa, what can we report on? And I said, well, let's take a look at where we are with MD Live. Let's take a look at the readership of some of our messages, and we can pull together what our goals were and where we've made progress so far. So a similar version of this slide that you're seeing right here was put in front of the board of directors on behalf of the benefits team. But it was so great to be a part of actually moving the needle on something that the board of directors was interested in. Wow, it's not all about the board of directors. It's so helpful to say as an internal communicator that I am contributing to some of these bigger company initiatives. And here's another one of those. So complying with the Joint Commission's National Patient Safety Goal. So this one was working with our quality and clinical excellence team as they have been working toward the Joint Commission, or our regulators for our hospital, their National Patient Safety Goal of getting hospitals at least 90% vaccinated by, I believe it's like March or so, or May of 2020. So their focus area here was just to increase employee flu shot compliance so that we can get all of our hospitals to at least that 90% threshold. So we came up with a twofold communication plan. Not only were we going to target general employees with creative content about getting their flu vaccine, but we wanted to target hospital leaders with actual data that highlighted the reasons employees decline the vaccine. So their team is capturing all of this data in our PeopleSoft system, saying why people are declining the flu shot. So they took the 2018 numbers and came up with this. I know it's very small, but you don't need all the details, but they came up with a pie chart and said, here's all the reasons, Alyssa. And I said, okay, great. Some of these look like myths. I'm going to get the flu if I get the flu shot. So we worked with our VP of nursing operations and said, hey, from your perspective, in your expertise, but in your kind and caring way that you communicate to staff, can you tell us more about these myths, and can you just bust them for us so that we can share this with our hospital leaders and say, here's why people didn't get the flu shot last year. Here's where you can target your staff to say, you think you're going to get the flu from the flu shot? It's a myth. And here's what our VP of nursing operations says to sort of thwart that myth. So we pulled that together. And then we also then worked with that same data guy in quality to come up with individual messages for those hospitals that weren't quite at that vaccination mark. I think they were at the 80%. So they were a little behind others. So we said, Okay, now break it down. He broke that pie chart down to just their hospital-specific information and said, here's why your employees are not getting the flu shot. So here are some tips and tricks for you to target these people, not, overly crazy, because we want to respect people's views, but here's what should be on your poster locally, or here's what you should put in the Hive app locally in your hospital to share this information and to hopefully get more people to become vaccinated. So what was really neat is as of October 1st, 34% of our hospital employees company-wide had already reported in the system that they had received a flu shot, which is amazing that a third of our employees had already reported it, considering the employees and our HR teams don't even have to put it into PeopleSoft until next March. So that was really great to see that over the basically course of a month since that campaign had started, that already a third of people had gotten and reported their flu shot. So I'm really excited at the end of this month to check in with our quality team again and see where we are, because then the next step is, well, if we're only at, we still have some hospitals that are only at 85%, let's focus on them. Let's target our communications to them and see how we can improve their vaccination rates. And then the Powered by Nurses campaign. This is a larger example because the main focus area is to support the company's objective to maintain RN turnover below 25%. That is not something that just communications impacts. There are so many things that go into turnover. So this was a really big initiative to help support HR teams, the operations teams, the quality teams, who are all working toward maintaining, just keeping our RNs, because there is a national nursing shortage. So the quality team came to us and said, what else can we do? And I started digging into tons of research and pulled together information to make a strategic toolkit for our leaders of resources that we already had: retention tips, interviewing tips, how to really communicate, how to be present as a CNO, a chief nursing officer in your hospital, to keep those people, to show them that you care, to keep them with you. Because if nurses are hard to come by, we want to keep the great ones that we have. So the communications objectives were to get hospital leaders to highlight nursing achievements. So we gave them tips on that in that toolkit. To make sure hospital leaders were supporting nurse managers, so the middle level management, to show that leadership is an actual advocate for nursing, and to get those leaders to communicate company information to staff, to nursing staff specifically, because they're harder to reach. And so I'm going to give some examples then through this. So company-wide, how we supported those hospital leaders was we had overarching communications. We launched a Powered by Nurses newsletter. That was the theme of this whole campaign. And that has just continued quarterly from our VP of Nursing Operations. Had lots of Hive app postings. And the key piece here of why we use the mobile app for this group of employees is because 75% of our workforce is deskless. And 30% of our entire workforce are nurses who are deskless. So we had to reach them in a manner that was going to be easier for them. They didn't have to log into a shared computer and click a whole bunch of buttons to log into their own personal email account or their company email account. They could just, with a couple of clicks, see these messages, among others, in the app. And then, of course, company-wide newsletter articles, because we were spotlighting these people not just in front of nurses, but in front of the whole company, as well as in our social media postings and on our newsroom and our blog now that we launched this year. And, of course, during Nurses Week is such a great opportunity for us to highlight the great things that they're doing. But I point out that this was bigger than just internal communications because in this instance, when you've got 30% of your employee population in this bucket of nurses, and they're consumers too. They're in a digital space. They're on Facebook. They're on LinkedIn. We want to highlight them in that external space so that they know that the company cares enough about them to spotlight the things that they're doing outside of our company, which is just such a good thing to do. And then just highlighting here that there are benefits of that multi-channel approach. So reaching people where they want to be reached so they could get the information in the Hive if they want, or utilizing that Powered by Nurses newsletter from our VP of Nursing Operations, who always signs the very first message. It always comes from her and from her heart, which is so great, because nurses are just caring people in general. So that's the type of culture that they want from their employer. And then so here's the success measures. Here's the results. So again, highlighting this business outcome, we are working with a bunch of other teams to maintain RN turnover below 25%. And as you can see here, from 2017 to 2018, technically RN turnover went down 1%, or excuse me, went up 1%. So we have more turnover in 2018. But the good thing is that 45% of our hospitals lowered RN turnover year over year. So they're doing something right. Was it our toolkit? Was it our Hive communications? Was it the Hive communications we were encouraging the local folks to post on their channel? We can't say 100% because so many things go into turnover, but what we can do is go back to those 45% of hospitals and say, what were you doing differently? What made this difference for you? Some of them, there were a couple hospitals that had 0 RN turnover, which is quite a feat. So we have some steps then in place of how we're tackling that going forward. And then the employee engagement survey scores were up for nursing in 2018 under those leadership and supervisor categories. So again, we can't directly say that because of our communications objectives to make sure that hospital leadership was being an advocate for nursing or communicating to their nurses, we can't say that's the one sole thing that moved these numbers. But because they're continuing to go up, we can only assume that it had at least a small piece in it. And the other piece, though, is because we are one small piece of this puzzle, putting out positive, encouraging messages about our nurses, highlighting the great things that they're doing, how it aligns with our company message or with our company values is not going to hurt anything. So if we continue in this manner, we can only hope to see that these scores continue to go up. So those are all of my examples today. If you have more questions, we can dig into that at the end. But how do we maintain those relationships with those partners? So the people that I mentioned in the examples were, of course, my marketing and communications team, but they're always a willing partner. The IT security team, which is kind of tough to crack. The benefits team, as well as the quality teams. So you can't just take the data that they give you and run off with it and report it to your team or report it to whoever you're supposed to report to. You've got to go back to them. So as I mentioned, as you're creating those communication plans, setting those touch points with them, make sure there's a touch point at the end or a month later as you let them get all of their data in order to say, hey, because we ran this month-long communication plan for you, how did your numbers fare? You know, did you get to that 90% completion of the compliance training? Are all of our hospitals doing well with getting towards that goal of being compliant with flu vaccines? So make sure you report your efforts back to that department so that they remember that you played a part in getting them to that goal. And of course, offer thanks. So whenever somebody does something for me or I am contributing to something that's bigger, I like to send a note. And like our IT team, for some reason, our IT guys just love cookies. No one bakes them cookies except me, so I'm just going to keep doing it because every time I need something from IT, which as communicators we know can be a problem sometimes, I bake them cookies because they're so helpful. And I know that I can get then support from them. Is it bribery? Kind of borderline, but they do know that I sincerely appreciate the effort that they're making for me, especially because some of them can just get so caught up in their day-to-day of what they're doing, whether it's IT or another team. I think they appreciate knowing that other departments, whether you work with them once a year or once a month, really, truly appreciate those sort of lost methods of showing appreciation. And then, of course, offering continued support. So if you go out of your way when you're consulted on other items, you did your big project with them, and then they just need that quick thing that could just get lost in the shuffle of your inbox, or, oh, that would take me 5 minutes, but I don't have 5 minutes right now. Go out of your way because then they will remember the great things that you can do to help move their agenda along. We'd rather be overly helpful so that they remember you and know that you're valuable than the alternative. So the key takeaways as we all work together to reframe how internal communications is perceived. And I do think that this is a big thing for every organization. So what questions can you start asking your partners? So after we jump off the call, you hang up, think about those top 3 things. What can I start asking as I have those those communications with these people as they ask me to send something. Go from being that order taker and feeling like that order taker and feeling like your day is always on fire because of somebody's emergency that they left to the last minute to tell you about. That always happens. Instead of that, you can move to being on the front end of those conversations, helping with the prep work, and making a strategic plan for getting them to their goals. And then how will you define success to prove your value? So you've asked the questions of those partners of, how do you measure success? But put that into then, what does that look like for you? What are your internal communications goals? And how do you define the success of helping all those other teams? And then how can you start building relationships with those teams? What does that look like? Are you inserting yourself on some of those meetings? Are you having meetings of your own or jumping in on calls, just touching base with people on those bigger things? So for example, something that I am doing right now as we are fine-tuning our marketing and communications annual plan initiatives for 2020, I am also having additional conversations with some of these other departments and saying, here's my initiatives that I'm working on for 2020. Where does your team fit? Where might I need some support from you? But then also on the flip side, where do you need support from me so that we can get ahead of this? Other team member, very likely, what some of your big initiatives are for the following year, whether they're cyclical things that we can both just get ahead on, or it's a new system that you're trying to launch, or maybe there's a new piece to that training that we do every year. Whatever it may be, they likely have some idea about it in the next couple months, if not already. So you can start having those conversations now to build out that editorial calendar for you and maybe feel like your hair is less on fire the next time they come to you asking for some assistance. So I hope you can think on some of these things today or in the coming months as you plan for 2020 and to be more of that strategic partner versus an order taker. So Justin, that's what I have. So I'd love to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. That was an amazing presentation. We actually have a lot of great feedback from the audience and a lot of great questions that we're going to dive into. But I just want to make sure you are aware that some of the audience members absolutely loved the presentation, thought it was very insightful, and very pleased with everything that you brought to the table today. So thank you,
that's
Alyssa.
so good. Thank you all.
So jumping right into our questions, right off the bat, how did you decide a mobile app was a critical investment versus other channels? Do you think you could shed some light into the decision process there, please?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, about 75% of our employees are deskless. So they don't have their own designated computer station by any means. Our nurses, which I mentioned are 30% of our employee population, are on shared computers. They have, their iPad that they're charting on or things like that, but it's not open to everything like email or intranet or those traditional communication channels. So because of those deskless populations, we knew that we needed a solution to reach them with important company information, whether it was from my team, from other teams, what other people are asking us to communicate. And studies that we had done and internal communications audits that we had done over the years showed that those employees weren't checking their email very often. So just pushing things through that old channel wasn't always going to work. So we thought that an app that they could access whenever was convenient to them would be a better solution that allowed us to get a variety of partners on board from the home office when they came to us requesting that information be shared with staff. The thing there, though, that I want to point out is we didn't just launch that as a communication tool solely. We knew that if we did that, the adoption would be pretty low because it would be perceived as, well, wait, you want me to download this to my personal device so you can communicate with me more, employer. So instead, what we did was we not only made it a communication tool, but we added some key HR function features like view your paycheck, view your benefits elections, see how many hours you've accumulated so far for PTO. So we wanted to make sure it had that what's in it for them feature. So if anybody is considering a mobile app, I would make sure that you put that on your list. It's a communication tool because of your need as the corporate person, but think about the employee's needs and what's in it for them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. What are the employee rewards points and how are those tracked or used per your LinkedIn rebranding campaigns?
Yes, good question. I kind of skimmed over that. I'm sorry. Too much information. So we have employee rewards, an employee rewards program where they can earn points for doing a variety of things. And those points go through they come through a vendor. So let's see some examples of how employees can earn them, through contests like the one that we did for the LinkedIn challenge. Um, but they can also earn them, like the hospitals use them a lot more than we do from a company-wide or home office perspective. They can earn them by just getting their flu shot. Some hospitals incentivize for that program. And there's actually a specific point card that we give out for that. You got your flu shot, thanks. And then taking our employee engagement survey, a lot of hospitals will give points for that. Patient satisfaction. Hey, you were mentioned on this patient response card after they discharged. Here's some step-up points. Thank you so much for all that you did for that patient. So there's lots of ways that employees can earn those points, and then they can cash them in online. It is a system where they enter in the points as they earn them, or they get automatically added depending on how big of a campaign it was. And then they can go through and pick all kinds of things to purchase with those points. I think the ratio is 1,000 points equals $5. So employees can purchase anything from travel to Disney gift cards to experiences. I actually used some of my points when I went to New York, and I cashed them in for a Broadway show, which was wonderful. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do with them. It's a fun program.
That sounds fun, and I hope the Broadway show was a blast.
It was great. I saw Lion King.
Oh, love it. Now I'm going to have the Lion King soundtrack stuck in my head for the rest of the day. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's a good problem to have. Our next question is from Tammy, and she wants to know, with such a high population of clinical employees, what innovative ways have you implemented to engage those employees with less of a reliance on email, in-person meetings, or computer-based comms?
Yeah. So basically, just what channels do we use to engage those people? Is that the bottom line of the question?
I would assume yes. I'll wait for
Okay.
Tammy to maybe offer some clarification there, but let's go
Well,
with
I'll
that.
start with that. Yeah, so the mobile app, the Hive, as we branded it internally, that is one of the biggest ways that we can communicate with those deskless employees. And then we also, for the clinical staff, first and foremost, huddle meetings and those nursing all staff meetings, those are the key places for employees to get the rundown of the information they need. However, each of our hospitals runs those a little bit differently. So some hospitals are doing it so much better, and some hospitals need some work. So it's actually on our 2020 plan as part of that Powered by Nurses campaign, which is continually ongoing, to come up with some sort of huddle guide or monthly communication guide that has just a few, maybe 2 or 3 key company-wide topics that we want to make sure get to these people's ears, as well as a space for highlighting employees who are demonstrating our values. And so that's a key initiative for the next 2 years as well. And then a space for just general local updates. So insert your needs here, local nursing manager. So that's on our list. We haven't done it yet, but we've gotten some good response from the hospitals and from our regional teams to move forward with creating that. So you don't want to standardize too much, but at the end of the day, we do still have some topics that we all want to make sure get in front of those people.
All right, thank you. Now, earlier you talked about relationship building, and Chloe wants to know, how do you start building these relationships? How do you get started? Do you make a list of folks in corporate? Is there anything else you would recommend?
Yes. So you can make lists. So what I would start with is, what are those cyclical things that come around every year? Annual enrollment, employee engagement survey, certain trainings that you have to do. I put compliance and diversity in those buckets. Things that are always going to come around that somebody's going to ask you about, maybe the month before if you're lucky, or maybe they don't. They just shove something at you and say, publish this, which is sad, but that's where we were about 8 years ago. So get ahead of those, start with those cyclical things, and a lot of them may be HR related, and start with those teams and say, hey, I know that annual enrollment is coming up in a couple of months. would you mind if we kind of sat down and got ahead of this year? I've got some ideas to really get in front of our employees to make sure our numbers are up. Or if you have a certain goal that you're trying to reach, I want to help you toward that. So I'd start with those that you know about. And then from there, you might start learning more things, like from the engagement survey, for example. I learned last year, after the results came out in 2018, that a lot of our HR teams were setting goals around like professional development for employees. That awareness of professional development and career opportunities was a low scoring item last year. So then I went to that team and said, hey, I noticed this. Can I help you? Or they even came to me, some of the teams came and said, hey, Alyssa, we're working towards this, and I know that you've got these channels. Can we put them in there? What's the right place? So if somebody's not coming to you, I would do your research on the things that are important to them, whether it's the cyclical things or results from an engagement survey or other survey or audit or whatever you have, and go to them and say, hey, I know this is coming up, or is this on your radar? How can I help? Or if it's not this, is there something else that I can help with? And that's a good starting point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add something. This is Lindsay, and I've witnessed this firsthand, sort of the fruits of all of that labor of yours is over time you build this team of people that view you as an ally and someone that can help you and a real partner. I mean, we've had meetings where you've had 18 different people from different departments, and one of the things that I think you do so beautifully is help everyone understand that while yes, they may have their own individual goals around compliance, goals around career development, at the end of the day, there is this common goal of creating an amazing experience for the people that work in Encompass. And so I think that's one of the other sort of overarching things is no matter sort of what flavor that individual department or leader is in charge of, the common goal is the same. And that I think can help you open some doors and also connect people that are disconnected. The number of times that we've been in meetings where the engagement team has never talked to the benefits folks or haven't talked to internal communications, I think helping connect and say, oh, it's so interesting that you mentioned career development from the engagement survey. I was just talking to our talent team. Let's all have lunch and help be that bridge. I just see you as such a central bridge connecting so many different departments that would really not be able to be as successful if they hadn't had you there to introduce and connect them.
Yeah, and just kind of going off of that, it's such a good point because now as our HR team is starting to kind of reorganize themselves, we've had some leadership changes, and as they are reorganizing themselves, they're saying, okay, as you know, we're mapping out what 2020 and beyond looks like, and we need Alyssa in the room. And it's so wonderful. Not an ego thing. It's I want to help you. I'm here to help. I'm so grateful that you thought of me as you're making these plans, so that I can not only provide that insight from that bird's eye view of the entire company, but my insight of what all of HR has been working on over the last few years because I've had to communicate it. So it's so great to then have them think of me because of the bridge building I have done over the years. And please know, it takes some time. If you are trying and have been trying, or you're just getting started to try, it's just like making friends in elementary school. It takes some time for these people to remember that you are that ally for them and that you're not working on your own agenda. You want to help provide that great experience for employees to make sure that the capacity that they have to actually accomplish all these things that everyone wants them to do is there.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Lindsay and Alyssa. We have time for one more question, and this is kind of a big question, but I specifically wanted to save it for last because I think it's going to allow us to dig a little bit deeper here. And Lindsay, please feel free to jump in on this one as well. What do you see as your biggest challenges, and how are you thinking about ways to address them?
Ooh.
Do you want me to kick it off?
You can start. You kick it off.
Yeah, it's actually a great segue from the conversation we just had. I see the biggest challenge and the biggest barrier to creating this incredible employee experience where people feel cared for is the siloed nature of human resources and internal communications at every organization. We've got different leaders in charge of different things using different tools with different budgets, and no one's connecting these dots. I think Alyssa is such an amazing example of using data from one place to fuel the strategy in another. And I think we need leaders and organizations to start working together more in a much more concerted effort and using common tools. Think about the number of usernames and passwords you have as an employee at your own organization. It's absolute insanity. We're talking 20, 25, 30 different places that you as an employee need to know to go, and then go there and do whatever you're supposed to do. And I think we're starting to see that the world of employees, they're just refusing to do that because they know it can be done better. And so that's what I see as the biggest challenge. We have to start working together and reaching around the organization to create more collaborative strategies that utilize tools that can help connect traditionally disparate initiatives and systems.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that is a good segue from what we were just talking about. Another thing is related to that consistent voice, that consistent messaging. I am lucky that we rebranded in 2018. And I say that with a grain of salt because it was a lot of work company-wide. But I feel lucky because it got all of the executive team on the same page, got all of our VPs and SVPs pretty much on the same page in terms of what is our brand? How does Encompass Health speak to its various audiences, employees and external audiences? And so we were able to better fine tune our messaging to employees as other teams came to us and said, hey, push this out. And a lot of things would start with this dire, like, did you know that you could die from diabetes? Like things like that. And it's like, that is not our voice. We are not like that anymore. So I had better brand standards now to push back on them and say, sorry, that's not in our brand, but I've rewritten it this way and I think it sounds great. I'm ready to move forward. So I pray that you're not all rebranding at this moment, but maybe take that as a step back of, do I feel like I have a good brand standard or guidance or something that I can look to as my North Star then when I'm working on making sure that our messaging is consistent for staff, that, executive voice messages are positioned a little bit differently as they should, or if we're targeting nurses, we know that they're very caring and loving people that are interested in, building relationships with their team members, that we can write that in a certain way if we're targeting them. So if my guidance there would be continue to push towards that consistent messaging organizational wide and have some sort of guiding principles, whether it's a branding guide or, an employee value proposition or anything like that that says this is our voice and this is how we address our employees or how we treat them so that they know, again, as Lindsay said, that we care about them as an organization.
Thank you so much, Alyssa and Lindsay, for your valuable insights. Thank you again, audience, for your time today. This concludes our webinar. I want to thank Alyssa and Lindsay one more time. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you at the next event. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.